I get so excited when I talk about consent, so I'm sorry if the camera starts trembling here. Consent is such an amazing thing to learn about and to teach your children about because it keeps them safe, but it also keeps them as safer people. It teaches them to be safer people. Our house, the golden rule that we've decided on currently for consent is the other person has to give enthusiastic consent, which means they doesn't eventually give in after being pestered long enough. It doesn't mean they say yes and then they're lying there stiff as a board because clearly they're too nervous to say that they're feeling uncomfortable. It means that the other person is just as excited to engage in sexual activity as you are. You're both like pumped and ready to do this. I feel like that's a pretty safe way of looking at things to make sure you're not crossing any unhealthy boundaries when it comes to consent, in my opinion. But the coolest thing I learned about consent, like the one thing that just blew my mind, I actually learned as a teenager in the 2000s from a 17 magazine, believe it or not. I have never on all of Al Green's internet seen anybody else talking about consent in this way. I'm sure it exists, I just haven't seen it. But there was an article in this magazine that explained, hey, if you've ever gotten to a certain point physically with somebody, that does not mean you ever have to go that far again. If you made out with your first boyfriend and you decided, hey, actually that's not something I'm comfortable with, then in that relationship you can say, hey, I don't want to make out anymore. That was too far for me. I'm not ready to go there, even though you've already been. And also for the next relationship, just because you made out with boyfriend number 1 doesn't mean you have to make out or have sex with boyfriend number 2. It's not because you did something in your past that you have to keep doing it, that you owe these guys something. Or even within that same relationship, if you go too far, you can withdraw that consent and be like, hey, I'm not actually comfortable doing that with any physical or sexual act at any time. I also think it's important to teach kids that they can withdraw consent. So maybe they were all excited and like, yeah, let's do this. And then they kind of were like, oh, actually, that does not feel good. Oh, actually, I don't feel safe in this situation. And they are allowed to withdraw consent at any point in any form of physical or sexual activity. So everyone in the comments, what are your best sexy time consensual advice pieces? I'm so glad our generation is having this conversation because I think it's gonna just be a blessing for our generation and the following generations to have this information. And like, honestly, what is sexier than enthusiastic consent? Like somebody who's so excited to have sex with you. Like, we should teach our kids that that's a normal and healthy thing to want and that anything less is just a no. There was one mom on here who said that she also told her kids to read body cues. So if you're going to go start having sex with somebody and you notice they're lying limp as a noodle, that's probably not consensual.